Eala sends the defending champion to an early exit in Washington.
Washington was already on its feet. Filipino flags filled the stands. The cheers echoed around the William H.G. Fitzgerald Tennis Center as Alex Eala walked toward the net after match point. The scoreboard told a story that only a few minutes earlier had seemed impossible. 6-2, 7-6. The tiebreak wasn't close, 7-1. The defending Washington champion was out. Alex Eala was through to the quarterfinals. But hidden behind that final score was another number. 1-5. That was the position Eala found herself in during the second set. Eala Fernandez had won 5 consecutive games. The momentum belonged entirely to the defending champion. One more game would have forced a deciding set, and everything pointed in that direction, except it never happened. Fernandez never reached set point. Instead, the match turned completely around. How does a player lose 5 straight games, trail by 4, and still finish the match in straight sets? What changed when the momentum looked impossible to stop? And how much did the atmosphere inside the stadium influence one of the most dramatic comebacks Washington has seen in recent years? To answer those questions, the story has to begin long before the scoreboard reached 1-5. From the moment the schedule was released, something unusual was happening around the tournament. The Washington Open has welcomed Grand Slam champions, Olympic medalists, and some of the biggest names in women's tennis. Yet one player kept becoming the center of conversations before she had even stepped onto the court. Alex Eala. Tournament owner Mark Ein later revealed that fans repeatedly asked the same question. When is Alex playing? Not the defending champion, not the highest seed, Alex Eala. Thousands of miles away from Manila, Washington suddenly felt connected to the Philippines. Supporters traveled from neighboring states carrying Philippine flags, filling sections of the stadium with blue, red, white, and yellow. During warm-ups, between games, and throughout every changeover, chants of Alex rolled across the stands. It didn't feel like a typical early round match. It felt like a home crowd had followed her across the Pacific. That support would become one of the defining images of the night. But it wasn't the reason this match was expected to be difficult. Standing on the opposite side of the net was a player who knew exactly how to win in Washington. Eala Fernandez wasn't simply another seeded opponent. She arrived as the defending champion, already familiar with the conditions, the court, and the pressure that comes with protecting a title. Her game presented a completely different challenge from the powerful hitting Alex had overcome against Jung Chinwen in the previous round. Where Jung relied on explosive serves and raw power, Fernandez built points through speed, anticipation, and relentless consistency. She extended rallies, absorbed pace, and forced opponents to keep finding one more accurate shot. She also carried another advantage. Earlier in the season, the two had met in Stuttgart. Fernandez won comfortably. That result offered a reminder that styles make matches. Alex had grown tremendously over the past few months, but she still had to solve a player whose game had already caused her problems once before. Yet Alex entered Washington with a level of confidence she hadn't possessed during that earlier meeting. A few weeks earlier, she had stunned defending Wimbledon champion Iga Swiatek in one of the biggest victories of her career. In her opening match in Washington, she had recovered from a setdown to eliminate Olympic champion Jung Chinwen, once again proving she could solve problems under pressure instead of allowing them to define the outcome. Those victories had changed more than her ranking. They had changed her expectations. She no longer stepped onto the court hoping she belonged. She expected to compete with anyone. That belief showed immediately. From the opening games, Alex refused to give Fernandez the rhythm she thrives on. She stepped inside the baseline whenever opportunities appeared, took time away with early ball striking, and repeatedly directed play into open space before Fernandez could settle into long exchanges. She wasn't chasing spectacular winners. She was controlling the geometry of the court. The defending champion struggled to establish her usual patterns. Forced to defend more often than attack, Fernandez accumulated unforced errors while Alex dictated where the rallies would be played. The first set belonged to Eala, 6-2. The Filipino supporters had every reason to believe another statement victory was unfolding. Then, one service game changed everything. That single service game changed the entire match. Until then, Alex Eala had controlled almost everything. She had taken the ball early, dictated the pace of the rallies, and prevented Eala Fernandez from settling into the patient, counter-punching style that carried her to last year's Washington title. The defending champion looked uncomfortable, searching for answers that never seemed to arrive. Then came one long game, deuce after deuce. Breakpoint after breakpoint, Fernandez survived. It was only one hold on the scoreboard. It became much more than that. For the first time all evening, her body language changed. She celebrated with a clenched fist. Her movement became lighter. The hesitation that had followed her through the opening set began to disappear. Her forehand, which had produced mistake after mistake, suddenly started landing deeper inside the court. Instead of reacting to Alex's pace, she began creating her own. Momentum shifted almost immediately. One game became two, two became three, then four. Before anyone inside the stadium fully realized what was happening, Fernandez had won 5 consecutive games. The scoreboard now read 5-1. Only minutes earlier, Alex had looked completely in control. Now the defending champion stood one game away from forcing a deciding set. The obvious question wasn't how Alex would recover, it was why Fernandez couldn't finish. Championship tennis often changes when the finish line comes into view. The patterns that build a lead are not always the patterns players trust when it's time to close the match. Fernandez had climbed back by extending rallies, waiting for opportunities, and forcing Alex into uncomfortable positions. Serving for the sets, she became more ambitious. She looked for shorter rallies. She aimed closer to the lines. She tried to finish points earlier instead of allowing them to develop. The pressure hadn't changed her ability. It had changed her decisions. Alex noticed it immediately. She didn't respond by chasing spectacular winners or trying to erase 4 games with a single swing. She did the opposite. She simplified everything. 1 point, 1 return, 1 rally. Instead of attacking low percentage shots, she gave herself more margin over the net and trusted the patterns that had earned her the first set. If Fernandez wanted the set, she would have to win one more difficult game. She never did. Alex held serve. The score became 2-5. Nothing miraculous had happened. The deficit was still enormous. But something far more important had changed. The pressure had crossed the net. Fernandez now had to serve for the set. Again, this time Alex's returns carried greater conviction. She refused to give away free points and forced the defending champion into one extra rally after another. Every deep return earned another roar from the stands. Every Fernandez error brought another wave of applause. The crowd wasn't winning the points. It was keeping belief alive long enough for momentum to change sides. Alex earned the break, 3-5. Then came a comfortable hold, 4-5. Suddenly, the scoreboard looked completely different. The player protecting the lead had become the player protecting her confidence. Fernandez stepped to the baseline, knowing she had already let one opportunity disappear. Alex stepped forward, knowing she needed only one more opening. When that opening arrived, she didn't hesitate. She absorbed Fernandez's attack, extended the rally, and waited patiently until the court finally opened. One forehand changed the direction. Another finished the point. The break was complete, 5-5. For the first time since the second set began, Washington believed the comeback was real. The comeback wasn't built on one spectacular winner. It wasn't built on luck. It was built on something Alex Eala has quietly developed into one of the strongest parts of her game, patience. Washington wasn't the first time she had refused to let the scoreboard decide the ending. Less than a year earlier at the US Open, she found herself in another desperate position against Clara Tauson. Down 1-5 in the deciding set and staring at match point, many players would have started chasing low percentage winners, hoping for a miracle before time ran out. Alex did the opposite. She reduced the match to its smallest pieces. 1 point, 1 return, 1 rally. Instead of fighting the entire scoreboard, she focused only on the next ball. Slowly, the momentum shifted. She forced a deciding tiebreak and survived it, giving the Philippines its first women's singles main draw victory at the US Open in the Open era. A few days before facing Leylah Fernandez, the pattern appeared again. Against Olympic champion Zheng Qinwen, Alex lost the opening set and quickly found herself trailing by a break in the second. Zheng's serve was dominating, and her power threatened to end the contest in straight sets. Once again, Alex resisted the temptation to panic. She adjusted her return position, stepped further inside the baseline on second serves, and gradually took control of the rallies. The match that appeared to be slipping away finished with Alex winning the final 2 sets comfortably. 3 matches. 3 completely different opponents. 3 completely different problems. Against Tauson, the challenge was surviving elimination. Against Zheng, it was overcoming overwhelming power. Against Fernandez, it was stopping momentum before it reached the finish line. Different situations. The same response. She stays patient long enough to discover another answer. That is becoming one of the defining characteristics of her tennis. A few months ago, Alex Eala was still being introduced as one of the sport's brightest young prospects. Every victory came with the same question. Can she do it again? Now the conversation is changing. After beating defending Wimbledon champion Iga Swiatek, Olympic champion Zheng Qinwen, and defending Washington champion Leylah Fernandez within the span of a few weeks, these performances no longer look like isolated upsets. They look like evidence. The evidence of a player learning how to solve different kinds of matches against different kinds of champions. That's what makes her increasingly dangerous. Opponents can prepare for a powerful hitter. They can prepare for an aggressive baseliner. It's much harder to prepare for someone who keeps finding new solutions after Plan A stops working. That reputation changes a draw before the first serve is struck. Seeded players no longer see Alex Eala as an exciting young talent somewhere lower in the rankings. They see a dangerous early-round opponent capable of changing tactics, surviving pressure, and refusing to disappear when the match turns against her. The support inside the stadium added another layer to that story. The Filipino crowd didn't create the fighter inside Alex Eala. That quality was already there long before Washington, but they amplified it. Every comeback begins with belief. Sometimes that belief comes from inside the player. Sometimes it comes from the people refusing to stop believing around them. Every hold brought louder cheers. Every break sent another wave of Philippine flags into the air. Every extended rally reminded Fernandez that the entire stadium could feel the momentum changing. The crowd didn't hit passing shots. It didn't force errors, but it magnified every emotional moment inside the match. For Alex, it became a reminder that the fight was still alive. For Fernandez, every missed opportunity suddenly felt heavier than the one before. That's why the atmosphere mattered. Not because it decided points, because it changed how those points felt. Which brings us back to where this story began. Why did Washington roar? Not simply because Alex Eala defeated the defending champion. The stadium erupted because people witnessed something far more difficult than winning a tennis match. They watched a player refuse to panic when almost everyone expected the second set to disappear. They watched a defending champion move away from the disciplined patterns that had built a commanding lead. And they watched hundreds of Filipino supporters keep the belief alive long enough for momentum to travel from one side of the net to the other. Together, those three forces created one of the tournament's most memorable nights. The scoreboard will always read 6-2, 7-6. The record books will simply show another quarterfinal appearance. But anyone who watched that second set will remember something different. A lead that looked untouchable. A comeback built 1 point at a time. And a player who has turned resilience into something her opponents now have to plan for before they even walk onto the court. The next time Alex Eala falls behind on a scoreboard, her opponents won't simply be protecting a lead. They'll be protecting themselves from a player who has made comebacks part of her identity.